Thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We are so much grateful to have you. And we are now currently at webinar 5 in this 6-part webinar series. We are so excited that today we have a very exciting topic. But before we start, we will go through some housekeeping issues just to get to familiarize yourselves with the housekeeping. But if you've been attending the webinar, I think you're more familiar with the instructions in this slide. Please, next slide. So uh, please introduce yourself in the chat. You can tell us your name, your organization, and your location. And if you have any questions for us, please use the Q&A function, preferably the Q&A because sometimes monitoring the chat when people are introducing themselves, we might lose the questions and the conversation in the chat. So please use the Q&A and also feel free to share reflections and comments in the chat at any point within the webinar. I'll ask my colleague Aisata to speak to our Francophone audience.
Thank you, Rina. Merci à tout le monde d'être là aujourd'hui. Merci pour votre fidélité. Et donc, simplement, comme d'habitude, si vous pouvez vous présenter dans le chat, le nom, l'organisation, le lieu. Ce webinaire n'a pas de traduction automatique, mais vous pouvez utiliser la transcription automatique si vous cliquez sur Caption, le petit CC en bas, et sur Transcription. Et cela va transcrire très, très bien tout ce qui est en anglais. Donc, si c'est plus facile pour vous de lire que d'écouter en anglais, n'hésitez pas. Si vous avez des questions, s'il vous plaît, ne les mettez pas dans le chat. C'est très compliqué pour nous de retrouver les questions dans le chat. C'est pour ça qu'il y a la fonction Q&A, qui est spécifiquement à côté, où vous pouvez poser vos questions. Si vous ne le voyez pas, il suffit d'aller dans les 3 petits points où c'est écrit plus ou bien more à droite de votre écran. Et là, vous pourrez trouver la fonction question-réponse, Q&A, avec un point d'interrogation. C'est plus simple pour nous de rassembler. Merci beaucoup. Over to you, Rina.
Thank you, Aisata. So welcome everyone once more to our webinar 5 in our series of 6-part webinar series. And today it marks a pivotal shift in our journey. We have discussed and we are moving from diagnosis to institutional reform. And in this topic, demographic dividend sensitive budgeting, we'll be able to translate or see how demographic and care evidence can be translated into budget decisions. And our focus today is not theory, it is institutional architecture. The topic today is budgeting that is sensitive to demographic dividend, which is a tool to link demographics, budget functions, and public policies. And in this discussion, we'll also be having exciting expert input and also have input from policy maker who will be able to share experiences from the Gambia. Next slide, please. So before we move into the session for today, I'll do a recap on where we are in terms of how far we have come from this webinar series. In Tier 1, which is webinar 1 and 2, we grounded ourselves in demographic reality. We examined the demographic transition and the structural evolution of age composition. We introduced the Demographic Dividend Monitoring Index, which is a national diagnostic tool that helps assess whether countries are prepared to harness demographic opportunity. And at that stage, we were not yet speaking about budgets because we needed to first understand what is this big word called demographic transition. And then we were establishing the pressures, the signals, and the readiness conditions at Tier 1, which is our focus in our webinar 1 and the webinar 2. Then in Tier 2, we moved to tools. In webinar 3, we clarified what care is. We also discussed and located care within the economy. We examined paid and unpaid care. We looked at examples from time use data and the structural invisibility that distorts planning. And then in that session, we also established care as an economic foundation rather than a peripheral social issue. So in webinar 4, we entered to tier 3, which is action, where we talked about program-based budgeting, which we identified that it is structurally unable to capture cross-cutting functions like care. And we also identified fragmentation, administrative silos, sector ceilings as structural barriers, especially when you're looking for care within the program-based budgeting format. So today we are moving to, or we take a next step in demographic evidence and ask ourselves if demographic evidence exists and care is also measurable from what we have seen, and that PBB, that is program-based budget, cannot structurally align cross-cutting function, then the question becomes institutional. How do we translate demographic signals into fiscal architecture? So today's session, we will be introducing the demographic dividend sensitive budgeting as a translation mechanism. But before that, let's go into the agenda for the day. Next slide, please. So we'll begin in the agenda by situating demographic dividend sensitive budgeting and what matters at this moment in the series and its broader policy conversation. This is about understanding the institutional gaps between demographic evidence and final decision making. We'll then move to the technical architecture of DDSB, and the objective is to understand how the tool function inside budget systems and how it connects to demographic trends, the diagnostic evidence, and the functional classifications within annual fiscal processes. Then after that, we will shift to institutional perspectives. We will examine how a tool operates, or such a tool, the demographic dividend sensitive budgeting, operates in practice within real government constraints, including ceilings, including timelines, and also negotiation dynamics. We'll then bring both perspectives together into a short integrated reflection, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. We'll conclude today with key lessons and a brief look ahead to our final session, which is coming up next week, where we'll be linking the demographic dividend sensitive budgeting with social accounting matrices and structural economic evidence. So today is not about today is about, translation, moving from demographic signal to fiscal architecture. Next slide, please. So we'll start by asking ourselves, why does BSDD matter today? It matters because demographic change is accelerating among many African countries. We see age structures are shifting, youth populations are expanding, and care needs are evolving along or across the life cycle. And the pressures are predictable and also measurable. So when we talk about the transitions, we say that they're already happening and we can already see them. And even in the transition, we also see the evolving care needs that are happening. At the same time, we also have evidence and we have demographic projection data. We have the demographic dividend monitoring index, which helps us with diagnostics, as we discussed earlier in our series. We have time use data. We understand where vulnerabilities accumulate and where human capital investment is required. Yet our budgets in most of our countries remain reactive. They respond to annual ceilings, immediate obligations, and short-term trade-offs. The issue is not the absence of data. We have already established that data exists. The issue is on institutional alignment. How can we make sure that there's better alignment among institutions for deliberate investments in regards to the changes that are already ongoing? So demographic evidence operate on a long horizon. budget decisions operate annually. When you see conversations around demographic transition, it takes the conversation speaks of long-term um, or long projections, but budget decisions always have the timelines and the cycle, which most of them operate annually, even if the planning is in the medium term, but the actual decisions happen on an annual basis. So if demographic and care evidence is not structured to fit within the fiscal architecture, it remains contextual rather than decisive. It informs discussion, but it does not drive allocation. And this is why demographic dividend sensitive budgeting becomes important. DDSB, as we call it, is not an additional analytical report. It is a structuring mechanism. It connects demographic trends, diagnostic tools like the Demographic Dividend Monitoring Index, and functional budgeting or budget classification within the annual budget process. And it helps us to ensure that the demographic realities are reflected inside submission, in the budget negotiation. In a country like Kenya, they mostly call public participation conversation, and inside allocation decision. DDSB does not expand the budget envelope, so the goal is not to see more allocation, but it reorganizes the budget so that there's better visibility. It embeds demographic logic within fiscal language. And to better understand this from both perspectives, we will first hear from Professor Dramani, who will explain the technical bit of DDSB, how it functions within the budget system. Then we will hear from Mariama Fane, who will share the perspective of a policymaker working within the real fiscal constraints and how such a tool operates in practice. And together, these two perspectives shared by Prof. Dramani and Mariama will allow us to understand the structure and also the institutional use of DDSB. Next slide, please. So before I introduce Professor, we are now moving into the technical foundation, which Prof will expound further. So far in the series, we have explored the demographic transition, the demographic dividend monitoring index, and the structural limits of traditional budgeting system. And today we are going to go one step further. We look at the operational tools that connects demographic analysis directly to fiscal decision making. And this is the demographic dividend sensitive budgeting framework was also developed by Craig, and Prof. Dramani happens to be the leader. And it is important to emphasize that this is not just an externally imposed model. It is a model that is as a result of collaboration between African researchers and policymakers who are were seeking a practical way to align budgets with demographic priorities. So the DDSB, in response to a very concrete policy demand, how do we ensure that national budgets reflect realities and long-term development goals? This tool represents both technical rigor and institutional dialogue. It combines the economic modeling with public finance processes. It bridges research and policy, and we are therefore fortunate to have as one person who led the development of this framework, and that is none other than Prof. Dramani, who will walk us through the logic, the structure, and the process behind the DDSB. Thank you so much, and over to you, Prof. Dramani.
Okay, thank you, Rina. So introduce these important topics. Then, sorry. Good morning and good evening. I don't know for everybody in who connects here. Then I will present what Rina said in terms of technical and scientific way this budgeting sensitive to demographic dividend framework. Okay, slides. Okay, then it's the question arise to know why we need a new budget tool. Is then Rina already talk about that. It's not that is something very new, but it's something which come from which come from the fields from policymakers because there is a big question at AU to try to better understand this demographic dividend, how we put our budgets, how we calibrate it to harness the demographic dividend and at the end of the day, the well-being of the population, African population. Then you know that budget are the most powerful policy tools for policymaker and for everybody. And we present and we discussed in the last session the PBB, then the traditional budget and ministry base on which Rina talked about. And the last session we discussed a lot about this. And also now the question is okay, uh, how we how is what is it important to take into account the social demand which come from the population at the last mile. It's very important to have this in mind. The population at the last miles and how we budget to target them and to improve their well-being. And this is this tool, which is a new tool, but which already which exists in terms of in the spirit of a policymaker, but there is not existed technically in terms of technical tools. Then Craig, with all the countries and the policymakers and the researchers on the network, we try to develop these tools to help to our policymaker to make, I can say, good decisions and for the well-being of our population. Then each population has its own demand. We have social demands, and we have this traditional way to see this social demand. But what we discover in the field is that in general we spend our budgets, but at the end of the day we don't know if there is the spending of the budget is aligned on the well-being of the population. The tool BSDD try to connect the dots on well-being at the last mile of population and budget spending. Okay, slides. Okay, then to better understand, we start by using the BSDD by starting with to know the profiles. And these profiles, which is demo economic profiles of the country, we do it at microeconomic level and macroeconomic level. It's not the same because microeconomic level is at household level. Then you have the economy at household level, which is known as microeconomy, and you have it also at macroeconomy level, which is the issue of Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Economy, and all those institutional co-spending public co-spending money budgets to try to create well-being, collective well-being at national level. Then we measure the potential of economy from demography with using generational economy methodology, and that's give you these two profiles, and that is the starting to know, to diagnosis, and to have a vision. Okay, slide. Then after this, here we take the case of Kenya, and we calibrate DDMI for between two periods, 2015, sorry, when the DDMI is 46%, and 2024, 10 years after, and when the DDMI is around 49%. And you can see in each of the, on the dimension where we have a gap. Then, for example, you see that there are some, we improve, Kenya improve its economic dependency coverage, but okay, everything improved, but we still not starting using the potential of our demographic dividend in the case of Kenya. Right? That's why this between 2014 and 2025, there is a big progress, but still under 50% of DDMI. Then you suppose that, yes, the potential is there, but all the elements to all the components which we need to harness the demographic dividend are not yet there. Then you suppose that this country need to improve and the allocation of the budgets in some specific and strategic sector to try to harness its demographic dividend. Okay, that's all. This is the diagnosis which help policymaker to orient for best orientation of the budget and to target specific policies. Okay, slide. And the question also is why traditional budgeting falls short. And we know that we have this PBB as structural limitation, okay, because of the purpose and the outcome, and I can say the finality of each policy in terms of economic policy is the well-being of population. Then, okay, when we take program or PBB, which is this it is a good tool in terms of how to spend public money is very important, but it's like we don't see populations. We just see programs, right? It's program, but those program is supposed that program is more important than population well-being, right? It's then that's one of the big limitation of PBB. And okay, now we will try to change and to go to see when I put 1 Kenyan shilling in or $1, 1 CFA in West Africa, and $1 C, and in the case of the Gambia, how can I improve the well-being at the last of the day, the well-being of the population? Because our country, the size of the budget is very big. It's $1 million. And at the end of the day, it's difficult for policymakers and for technicians to say, okay, we spend, for example, $5,000 million in the country, but can we say how much our well-being improve when we finish spending this $5,000 million? Then PBB can say, yes, this program is work, this program is work, this program not work, but it can't say that, okay, how we improve the population well-being at the end of the day. And that is the purpose of each policy. If each public policy is to improve the well-being of the population at last mile. That's something which is very important that we need to keep in mind to better understand we are going. Okay, slide. And yes, all this work is not that Craig do it itself only, but it's come from the AU roadmap. Then you have a key action which are proposed on the AU roadmap. You can then we can read it. Some of them are analyzed and understand socioeconomic with national demographic dividend profiles and so and so. But also after that, at Addis Ababa, there is one of a big question which come from policymakers. They say, okay, yes, we want to harness this demographic dividend. And you say you can recommend us to do this. But all this, we already do that. The question is, okay, can you say us how to do things differently? Because we put money on youth, we put money in health, we put money in education, we put money in infrastructure, and all this we try to we allocate money. But the issue is, okay, what wrong? Why can we say that we harness or not this demographic dividend? But at 2017, 2013, 2017, we don't have this tool to respond to a question. Now we can respond exactly that you need to allocate better here, and this policy, you can improve it. This is not good, and so and so. But also, we start with this work by a demand which comes for the Malian policymakers who came here in Senegal at TS and said, yes, we want this tool. That's the starting of the process of BSDD, Budgeting Incentive to Demographic Dividend. We want this tool to better allocate our resources, which is very, very rare, which are not so much, but we need to do it in the best way. Then we start with Mali, 2017, 2018, 2019. It's around 2 years this is the first country which come to say, I want this tool. And after the other countries, there are now more than 15 countries which work on this to have the budget incentive to demographic dividend process and results. Slide. Okay, what BSDD actually does. Then the first thing is that we need to align budget with demographic priorities because, as I already said, every policy at the end is for us as human, it's for population. That's the issue of each policy we do at country level, right? Then we take here two countries, Senegal and Kenya, in the same scale, and to try to give you a big picture. This is the aggregate profiles for consumption and labor income of Kenya and Senegal. And you can see that the size is very important in terms of policy action. Each country is not, even if you can say that we are similar, but it's not the same in terms of size. The size is counting in terms of budgeting, right? The structure also change, and the structure of the population also counts in terms of how we allocate money, how we allocate budgets, right? Then you can see that countries are similar, but countries are different in terms of prioritize, in terms of population structure, in terms of who supports, who are dependent, who are independent, who are not dependent, and who supports who. That's very important in terms of all our fiscal policy, our taxes, who support it in terms of population, right? This give us this shape on this graph give us that picture in terms of similarity, yes, but also differences in terms of population structure and supporting the dependency for youth and for elders. Slide. Okay, then this is BSED in terms of a process. Then it's a multi-step analytic process which take 8 to 12 months. We work with all the ministry, this inter-ministerial collaboration. It's a technical modeling plus policy dialogue. Then we start by diagnosis, and after analysis, simulation, reporting, and policy, right? Then it's, yeah, slides. Okay, then this is the step. We have step one on which we try to understand the social demand. But the social demand is two parts. We have social demand which on paid work. Then we use general account, national transfer account to calibrate. This is some example. You see the shape of the profiles of some of the select countries, and Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana. This is just for illustration. Then it's what I'm saying for 2 minutes ago, that the shape is similar but is different. The structure of population is different. Right? Then this gives us the life-cycle deficits, which is one of the proxy of social demand, global social demand in a country. Because the purpose of a Ministry of Plan, of all the ministry, public ministries, is to try to respond to the social demand. But the social demand has two parts. You have paid work and slides. You have unpaid work, right? On the unpaid work, there is also the unpaid we develop also to understand the social demand. We develop generational accounting of generational time transfer accounts to understand the social demand, which we call the life-cycle deficits, that is now care life-cycle deficit, which is unpaid. Then you see that you are paid work, which give you the social demand in terms of life-cycle deficits, and you have care deficits, and we have the two to understand what is the size of the demand, because you have explicit contracts and implicit contracts in the society. And a lot of work, a lot of social protection come from unpaid work. Then, for example, and this gives for the policymaker the size of the demand. And it's very important to have this at the beginning to start the process. Then you know what is the size of the demand in terms of paid work, and the size of the demand in terms of care deficits, and the overall, which is life-cycle deficit plus care deficits. Okay. And when we finish this, that's the step one, we move to the step two. Slide. Then on the step two, we try to reclassify the traditional budgets. You know that we use PBB in our countries, but we classify all those budgets into 4 components and 5 functional categories. Right? Then we reclassify expenditure into 8 functional categories, and we move beyond the administrative levels and link spending to DDMI dimensions. Okay, then we have 4 components, which is human capital, governance, economic structure, professional and social network. And each component is divided into 2. Then for human capital, you have education and health, For governance, you have institution and security. For economic structure, you have energy, building, and economic affairs. And for professional and social network, you have professional network and social network. This gives us the four components and the eight functional categories on which every country in the world we can align its budgets into these four components and eight functional categories. Okay. And it's important to understand that these eight categories come from DDMI. This is not just a category like this. These eight categories come from DDMI. They are dimension and sub-dimension of DDMI index. It's very important to have it in mind. Okay, slides. And step 3, we retropolate. As we want to know when I put $1, one Kenyan shilling, one CFA, $1 of the budget, how will be the effects in terms of well-being on the population, to the population on this sector, for example, in education, in health, in social sector, and so and so. Then we analyze past investment, then give us the shape of current demographic performance. We analyze 20 to 25 years of indicators. This is what you see here. You have 10 countries in Africa with the retropolation of the DDMI on the 20 years, 20 to 25 years. And here that's what we call retropolation, right? We go on the past. That is 20 to 2000 to 2025 or 2022, for example. And here you have the shape, and the graph shows us the DDMI score and the GDP per capita. The GDP per capita, which is one of the results of the outcome in terms of the wealth we create at in each country. Then you can see the shape, how it's changed. Then you can say we can this graph, if I want to summarize, yes, you can create wealth, which is the GDP per capita is growing, but the DDMI is not growing, right? Because yes, you need first to create wealth, and after you need to redistribute it. But if we discover that in Africa and in these 20 years, all of Africa countries, they create wealth. But you see all the problem we have in terms of redistributions on of this wealth in the population. Okay, this gives us retropolation and the index, the DDMI, to have what we call temporal series. Okay, slide. And also we retropolate the DDMI, and also we retropolate the budget, the functional budget. Then you have the eight functional sector well, I present early. Then and we here we take, for example, 10 years to present it in terms of how we see the shape, the share of in terms of the global budget, right? Then you can see how each country. This is on average for 15 countries here. Then you can see in Africa, in West and Central Africa, how what is the size of, for example, economic affairs, energy and building, educations, institutions, professional network, social network, health, safety and security in the budget. That's how we allocate, how in average country allocates. And you can see it 5 years by 5 years, but we have it in terms of temporal series from 2000 to 2025. Okay, this link historical spending to outcomes, because I already present you the DDMI in terms of on the past 20 years. Then this is the budget structure in terms of the past 20 years, okay? And we can identify then long-term patterns and understand demographic trajectory. Okay, slides. And after that, we link the two. Then we link the DDMI to the budget, right? And this is an econometric estimation. It's help us measure the impact of sectoral spending, quantify the responsiveness of DDMI dimension, and also strengthen evidence-based allocation. Then here, this is a table to help country experts to understand what you have, what we call budget elasticities, how you can interpret it. And you have a range of those elasticities, and we have also you have also three columns on which you have three types of policies. You have policies in terms of operating expenses, which is policy on human capital. You have policy in terms of investment, which is investment policy at sectoral level, and you have policy of transfers and subsidies, which is linked to social policy, sectorial social policies, right? Then you can see, for example, if your LRC is between this and this range, you can see what is what interpretation correspond, right? Okay, that's it's very important to know. Okay, do we have efficiency at sectoral policies in this sector, for example, education, health, security, institution, and so and so. Okay, slides. Okay, then when we finish that, then we have the elasticity, which gives us the interpretation. Now we rate. This is a rating and global budget performance. This bet is rating and sectoral global budget performance in terms of well-being. It's very important. It's not just in terms of allocation. Then you have two types of budget allocation. When you allocate budget, you have one of the effect is the allocation effects. Is the allocation of your budget is good? This is one thing. But what do you allocate? You allocate for public spending. Public spending, behind public spending, you have public policy. Behind public policy, you have populations. And beyond population, you have the well-being, right? Then the end of all those spending is well-being of population. Then you have two effects: effect of allocation and effect on well-being. And you have this table, which is some average table, which give for each country on the process how they can see, okay, my allocation is good, but I don't the effect on the well-being at sectoral level is not good. Then we need to change policies and allocation, because allocation is good, right? Then there's no problem of allocation, but we don't have well-being. Why? You suppose that something is not good. It can be eviction. There are eviction in this sector. There are some of the constraints in the sector, and we need to change this by do reforms in this specific sector. But in the other sector, it can be good. Then if it's good, then it's business as usual. Then the policy is good. Then we need to maintain it. Yeah. Okay. That's this rating step 5 give you how each sector is different and what we need to do in terms of policy. And this is very precise in terms of when you need to do this in this sector, in this particular sector, which is different to the other for the other sectors. Okay, slide. Okay, then you see that in the previous step 5 is what we call partial equilibrium. The sector is sector, right? But the economy is not a sector. It's all those sectors are the biggest spending is simultaneous. It's at the same time. Then you need to have equilibrium because it's the same amount. Every sector has its own budget and is spending its budget according to the priority to the prioritize. Okay, then you have this model which is the BSDD general equilibrium model, which give you all the interconnected that the economy is an interconnected system, and that if we push the budgets in one sector, it will improve the other sector. What we call, for example, is some of the effects which can be ripple effects. We can capture ripple effect and simulate alternative scenarios. Then you have each sector, and you have the earth of the model, which is the overall budgets of the country. Then budget allocation is very important in terms of well-being. That's very, very important, this model in terms of, okay, it's not just this budget we can allocate as we want. No. Allocating budgets is for one, the finality is well-being of population. Okay, that is the big model which give us all the interconnected relation or interrelation between sectors, between all the policies at sectoral level. We have 8 sectors, and each sector we have 3 types of policy, which give us 8 multiplied by 3, 24 policy on which we can do simulation, right? Okay, slides. Then step 7 and 8 is report and policy translation. Then when we finish all this, then we have results. You see a lot of results. Then you need to communicate now. Then we have sectoral optimization reports, scenario-based recommendation, advocacy documents, integration into parliamentarians' dialogue, because the budget is a public good. It's for everybody. Then it's very important to integrate, to discuss with parliamentarians or local elected mayors and all those policymakers, and also decision makers, civil society, is because it's a public good and public services, right? Then it's not something which is with embargo, no. Then this is step 7 and 8 for, report and policy translation. Slides. And now I think that will be the end. It's when you finish that, it's supposed that you need to change the budgeting mindset. The mindset of the budget will need to change, because budget is a tool to harness our demographic dividend. But when we say demographic dividend is what? Demographic dividend is well-being, right? Then budgeting, we allocate our budget to have and as finality to have well-being, demographic dividend and well-being. That is the spirit of all the work of our governments. Then it's important to change the logic from administrative logic to societal logic, because the well-being is not just for just me; it's for all the system. It's for the national well-being. right? And for that, we need to shift from ministerial to social outcomes, align spending with demographic transitions. And yes, you see that we move to PBB, to functional budgeting approach. And it gives us also, when you see a life deficit and care deficit, it gives you the overall social demand in terms of the strategic long-term perspective, right? Then that is a path to a well-being budget. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Dramani, for sharing that. A very insightful conversation, and also even from hearing from the comment on the chat in discussion on policy dialogue. I think the feedback is just amazing to hear what people are also mentioning about what they're gaining from the insights that you have just shared. You'll also all understand why we had to structure this series in that kind of format so that every conversation build on each other. The last session that we had, we were talking about program-based budgeting, and when we talked about why program-based budgeting is not sufficient to plan for care policies, the feedback we got is program-based budgeting not a good thing? But now I think when you hear what Prof has clarified, even when he's talking about the components, the 4 components, and also the 8 functional categories, and then you get to clearly understand why functional budgeting becomes a better approach, especially when you're speaking about care responsive budget. So I want to thank you, Prof, for sharing that. And in the conversation, we are seeing that demography is not simply a trend to observe. It is a dynamic to manage, and management happen mostly through the budget. So the demographic dividend is not a strategic slogan. It is not an economic equation, and that equation depends directly. It's an economic equation, and that equation directly depends on how public resources are allocated. We now understand that BSDD is not just a technical model, it is a process. And as you have shared, a process that requires reclassification, measurement, estimation, simulation, and ultimately different budget decision making. Even in the last conversation or the last slide that you have shared, discussing about changing the budgeting mindset, which is the intention of now looking critically at how can we do that. So for this webinar series, what is particularly important, especially on conversation of BSDD, is that BSDD connects demographic analysis. It also connects human capital investments, health and education. It also enables us to look at public finance realities and political trade-offs. It creates a coherence between the long-term vision, which is mostly conversations that happen when you're talking about demography, and how we can translate that into annual budget decisions. And we also see that BSDD shifts the budgeting logic. Instead of starting from administrative structures, it starts from social outcomes and demographic trajectories. This opens a space for better integration of cross-cutting priorities, including those we have been discussing throughout the series, such as youth investment, human capital, and also long-term planning. I want to welcome to us the next speaker, who will be talking about, will be sharing specific country experience, especially for experiences from the Gambia. And the session that she will be speaking to will allow us to see how this process translates into institutional practice, including the challenges, the strategic choices involved. And as we transition, I would like us to keep one question in mind. If the budget is more concrete expression of a country's priority, to what extent does it reflect the demographic trajectory? So before I welcome Mariama Fane, I will talk about briefly about or allude to what she's going to speak to. We have just come from a session of looking at how BSDD is constructed and how it links to demographic dynamics, the DDMI as a diagnostic tool. Remember, we mentioned that DDMI is not a budgeting tool, it's a diagnostic tool. And then we have also discussed about functional budgeting and how this whole is bring on board in terms of having one coherent structure. And now we will turn to hear from the perspective of a policymaker who must defend allocation within fiscal ceiling. So what Prof. Dramani has taken us through is basically the technical architecture of what BSDD is all about. But again, it's good to listen to the actual institutional reality because Usaimers at the Gambia's National Population Commission Secretariat and under the office of the Vice President. She oversees the implementation of the National Population Policy and coordinates key national programs that at advancing population and development priorities. Observatory has a demographic with the African Union Roadmap 4 pillars on demographic dividend and launched a demographic dividend budgeting transformation initiative with the Ministry of Finance to align the national budget with demographic priorities. She has also played a key role in securing parliamentary acts that formally establish both the National Population Council and the National Observatory for the Demographic Dividend. Mariama is going to speak about this from a perspective of a decision maker on what happens inside government when demographic evidence meets budget ceilings, trade-offs, and institutional constraints. Welcome, Mariama.
Thank you very much, Marina. Indeed honored to take part in this very important webinar with the objective to explain why tools such as DDSB are a necessity from the point of view of someone who must justify priorities and choices within government. Slide, please, Rina. Okay. So the first question is, why does demographic care and time use evidence often fail to influence budgets, even when data exists? The problem that we have is that we often assume that if we provide robust data on demographics, care, and time use evidence, the budget will naturally follow. However, the reality is that evidence frequently fails to influence fiscal decisions, and that we know as policymakers. The problem is in the lack of information. It's a gap in translation and integration, and that is very important. Budgets operate through ceilings, which are set before evidence is reviewed. The budget has certain mandatory current commitments. It must meet before honoring any other payments. The government has certain mandatory commitments. They have to meet those commitments before they honor any payment. If demographic or care and time use evidence is not embedded within the rules of the budget, it remains contextual rather than allocative. There is also a time mismatch. Demographic transition unfold over decades. Care burdens accumulate gradually. But in addition, unpaid care work is not recorded in additional accounts. What is visible in economic accounting struggles to become visible in fiscal allocations. So the issue is not evidence production, it is institutional translation and integration. Evidence exists, but it is not structurally positioned to influence a fiscal decision. Next slide, Rina. So the second question is, how do budget processes, timelines, and ceilings dominate decision-making over evidence? You'll see from this slide that budgeting is governed more by institutional structure and incentives. than by the availability of data. On the top left, we have strong demographic care and time use evidence. It speaks the language of transformation, that is youth dependent, gender equity, long-term productivity, human capital formation. It tells us what is necessary for sustainable development. On the bottom left, we have the budget architecture, which the evidence must filter through. The problem is not that the evidence is weak. The problem is that the two systems speak different languages. Evidence is developmental and long-term, while budgets are fiscal and short-term. Unless demographic and care evidence is translated into fiscal space analysis, costed program proposals, and integrated into ceiling negotiations, it remains persuasive, not decisive. That is the structural gap we must address as decision makers. Next slide, Rena. So why do ministries and agencies with limited technical capacity struggle to integrate demographic or care considerations without structured guidance? Ministries struggle not because they lack commitments, they're very committed, but because the system does not guide integration. Demographic and care data are descriptive, but translating them into costed, affordable programs require tools many ministries do not have. Most agencies are structured for service delivery, not demographic analysis. And when we budget templates, and when budget templates do not require these inputs, they become optional. It's not compulsory for us to put them in budget templates. So demographic and care consideration issues cut across sectors. Ownership is often very unclear because you have the care falling under various ministries like health, like gender, youth and sport. So it has no single ownership. So nobody takes care of it. Additionally, in ceiling-driven processes, decisions are made in fiscal, not social language, and that we should really understand as policymakers. Excuse me. Without structured guidance, integration remains inconsistent and easily sidelined. Next slide, please, Reina. So why do templates, functional classifications, and explicit requirements matter more than ad hoc analysis rather in practice? For many years, we have relied on advocacy, targeting policymakers, National Assembly members, ministers. We have been doing strong studies, dialogue, showing the evidence. That work is important, but it rarely shifts allocation. Budget systems respond to rules, not arguments. Templates determine what must be submitted. Classifications determine what is visible. Core circulars define what is mandatory. Performance frameworks shape what is defended. Ad hoc analysis may influence debate temporarily, but ceilings define what is possible. Institutional design drives behavior consistently. If demographic and care priorities are not embedded in budget rules, in classifications and templates, they remain persuasive but unfunded. So real change happens when priorities are built into the architecture of public finance. That is very important. So next slide, please. So how does DDSB respond to these institutional constraints? I think these are already alluded to or have been clearly alluded to by Professor Dramani, but I'll just add a little bit to it. DDSB translates demographic realities, that is the youth pressure, the dependency ratios, the care burden, into formats that the budgeting system can absorb and act upon. It makes demographic pressure visible inside budget submissions, not just in policy documents. It reduces cross-sector fragmentation by organizing expenditures around demographic dividend priorities rather than leaving them scattered across ministries. It strengthens justification during trade-offs. When ceilings tighten, proposals grounded in structured demographic analysis are more defensible. We can defend those proposals more. It frames care and youth investment as structural economic investments, not discretionary welfare spending, as is currently happening. And critically, it links long-term demographic trends to annual fiscal decisions. With DDSB, instead of negotiating in the dark, decision makers can weigh options with clearer evidence on long-term returns, sector pressures, and allocation efficiency. So what DDSB does is that it translates demographic pressure into fiscal action. Next slide, please. So in this second part, I'll be talking about why budget reforms became a necessity, the transformation journey for the Gambia, what our budget classification revealed, how DDSB strengthens budget allocation, and the regional perspective, among others. So the Gambia's demographic window opened in 2000 from Prof presentation showing the what we call the demographic dividend profiles using the NTA methodology. It showed that our window opened in 2000. Not only that, but we've also been gaining in terms of the drop in youth dependency, economic dependency, and also elderly economic dependency. But that alone does not suffice for a country to harness the demographic dividend. That is just a potential. There should be the country should be ready to harness the demographic dividend by making certain deliberate investments. So when the window opened in 2000 and continued to expand, we did an assessment of our readiness to harness the demographic dividend. And the results show that we have a score of 36%. I was just looking at that of Kenya. And Kenya scored 40-something%, I believe, 46% in 2015 and 48.7% in 2024. This is what we scored, 26%. And this showed that we're not fully, or we're not leveraging this opportunity. And this is very, very important. And this is an eye-opener for the Gambia, or it was an eye-opener for the Gambia, because this DDMI aligns with the 4 AU roadmap pillars. And this window also does not open forever. It closes. It's going to peak for the Gambia around 2035, and it's going to close in 2050. So meaning that there is no time. It's been open since 2020, but we're struggling in ensuring that we make the right investments, because the budget right now, the structure of the budget masks, the expenditures that the government is making. So in transforming from the budget that we currently have to a DD-sensitive budgeting, the government will be able to see exactly where funds are being spent. So the analysis revealed a structural gap when we did it, which shows that public expenditure was not sufficiently aligned with demographic realities. And this is why reform became a necessity in the Gambia. So through the DD-sensitive budgeting approach, expenditures are reclassified, like Prof was explaining, into 8 functional areas aligned with the DDMI priorities. Spending is assigned by purpose rather than by ministry, and its nature is clearly identified, providing a more accurate picture of what government is truly financing. Because the DDMI tells you where the government is spending on investments, whether on operations, and also on transfers, like Prof explained. By the way, we're being supported by CREC through the leadership of Professor Dramani to work on the budget transformation of the Gambia, which is in progress. So because the national budget is the primary instrument for allocating resources across sectors, its structure directly shapes policy outcomes, and Prof mentioned the same thing. So when the budget is aligned with demographic priorities, the budget becomes a strategic tool, not just an accounting document, capable of accelerating inclusive growth and positioning the Gambia to capture its demographic dividend. The Gambia's demographic opportunity will not only translate into growth unless the budget is structurally aligned with demographic realities. DDSB is the mechanism that turns demographic potential into financial national priorities. And talking about growth, I'm not just talking about economic growth, but I'm talking about growth that is not going to leave anyone behind. Next slide, please. So the Gambia's budget transformation journey. The Gambia's budget transformation marks a shift from administrative silos, which focuses on who spends, to a functional approach that emphasizes the purpose of the spending, aligned with the DDMI and the AU roadmap pillars. So from 2005 to 2024, that is the data that we looked at, we reclassified expenditures to uncover the hidden, we call it the hidden budget. For example, medical treatment costs that were scattered around multiple ministries were reclassified under the health function, and this gives a more accurate picture of national health investment. Similarly, training expenditures across sectors were reclassified under the education function, recognizing their human capital contribution. These corrections improve visibility, comparability, and strategic analysis. Most importantly, we reorganize spending into 8 functional areas, just mentioned by Prof. DDSB also assesses the nature of the expenditure, like I said earlier. It tells you where funds are going, whether it's investment, whether it's operations, and also whether it's transfers. It strengthens planning, improves allocation analysis, and positions the Gambia to better, it will position the Gambia to better align its budget with long-term demographic and developmental goals. So this transformation is still a work in progress. And like I said, we're being supported by Professor Ramani and team to work on the transformation. We've done the what we call the budget transformation and also the retropolation. So we're yet to do the Arimash, where we merge the budget and also under DDMI. So what the reclassification revealed, the budget reclassification, you can move to the next slide, which is the budget reclassification. Yeah. So this is the budget reclassification rather. So it revealed important trends, as you can see in this slide. It shows a shift towards harnessing the country's demographic potential. And this is marked by increased investment, an essential driver of workforce productivity and sustained economic growth. Notably, investments accounted for approximately 33% of the national budget between 2017 and 2024, compared to less than 3% during the period 2005 to 2016. Reflecting a growing emphasis on capital formation in key areas such as infrastructure, education, health, and other productive sectors. The functional analysis shows some imbalance on which function is being funded the most, with economic affairs taking the chunk. Economic affairs is taking 31%. You have professional networks, 1%, health, 5%, education, 13%. So we are saying that there's increased investment in infrastructure, energy, schools, and hospitals. And this supports economic growth, like we have said, but this is not guided by a structured demographic framework. Because if you look at the 2 periods that we are showing, we have 2 different regimes. And what is reflected is showing the priority of the regime. So you never know, a new regime can come and change priority and invest on something else. And we might go back to operations overtaking investments like we have. Also justifying the need for the country to have DD-sensitive budgeting. So can we go to the next slide, please, Reina? How does DDSB strengthens allocation decisions? It identifies high impact sectors, making it easier to target investments that accelerate the demographic dividend. It also links budget function to the DDMI pillars, like we have just mentioned, ensuring spendings reflect demographic priorities. And by organizing expenditures by purpose, it improves efficiency. It also reduces fragmentation and also clarifies the trade-off that must be made when we're investing. Importantly, it works within existing fiscal constraints, enhancing the quality of allocation decisions rather than increasing spending. That is, it works within the budget. It's not about increasing the budget, but it's about allocating the budget in a more efficient manner. In short, it makes the budget more strategic, more coherent, and impact-driven. So structure improves, and also there's strategic coherence when it comes to the DDSB. Next slide, please. Now we can go to the regional perspective. Based on the presentation that Prof just made, one can see that some countries are doing better than others. But I can confidently say that the Gambia's story reflects the broader African experience as the share of the regional collaborative platform of some countries in Africa. The African experience, some countries are doing better than others, but across the continent, demographic shifts are accelerating in the African continent, and this is something that is being felt by all countries, and care demands are also increasing. So the needs of women, youth, and households are growing, yet our budgeting systems often fail to respond. They only respond after pressure becomes crisis, and that is very disastrous. So this is why the DDSB matters. DDSB is an African-led institutional innovation. It's designed for African institutional realities. It does not ignore fiscal constraints. It does not override political judgment. Instead, it improves the architecture of our choices. Next slide, please, Rina. So this next slide shows why the DDSB is a necessity from a decision maker's lens. It discusses what DDSB does and what it does not, as well as the importance of structure. So when it comes to what DDSB does not do, it does not eliminate fiscal constraints. It does not replace political judgment. It does not dictate allocations. But what it does is that it makes demographic pressure visible inside budget systems. It connects fragmented care expenditure across sectors. It strengthens justification during ceiling negotiations. It translates long-term demographic evidence into annual fiscal language. It elevates care from welfare spending to economic infrastructure. So what happens if we don't have a structure in our countries with the demographic transition that is going on? Care remains invisible, and that is exactly what is happening right now. Demographic evidence also remains academic. We have reports. We've done the DD profile, the DDMI, and without the budget transformation, those documents are going to be sitting on shelves gathering dust without making it for the purpose for which they were developed. Then budget also becomes reactive without structure. But with structure, trade-offs become informed, care becomes economic planning, demographic reality shapes allocation debates. Next slide, please. So final reflection. Demographics send signals long before crises emerge. As decision makers, the question we should ask ourselves is whether our budgeting systems are capable of responding to those signals or not. If they're not, why and what should we do? As decision makers, we are judged by the allocation we successfully defend, not the reports that we write, not the policy briefs, not the analysis that we do. If demographic realities cannot be translated into the language of ceilings, submissions, and trade-offs, they remain peripheral to fiscal decisions. DDSB provides that translation. Thank you very much, Rina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mariama, for the insights. From a policy maker perspective, this is interesting to hear and the progress that is being made in the Gambia. And I'll just be connecting the two from what has been shared by Prof. Dramani and what has been shared by Mariama. What Prof. Dramani has shared is he took us through the technical tool from a researcher perspective who has worked on this document. So when you say it's African-led, then the minds like that of Prof. Dramani are involved in developing the tool. And then we have heard from Mariama, who has showed us the realities of how this tool is now translated into use from a day-to-day basis from a government perspective and the practicality of that. From what we hear from the presentation, is the message is clear. The challenge is not awareness. There is awareness. The challenge is not translation. Demographic signals already exist. Care burdens are already measurable. Most countries are doing the time use survey. We have seen that commitments are signed, but what determines whether they influence budgets is the structure. From the Gambia's experience, we see that reforms is not about expanding the envelope. It's about reorganizing the architecture so that demographic reality becomes visible inside fiscal systems. We have also heard something broader, that these constraints are not unique to one country. So it's good to also cross-share, cross-learn from the conversation and also even the feedback that we are receiving. They are shared across the region, and DDSB is not just a technical innovation. It is an institutional correction. It strengthens the quality of trade-offs. It improves alignment between long-term demographic signals and the annual fiscal decision. And it enables the government to defend allocation based on structure rather than rhetoric. And BSDD is the bridge between the evidence and the action. So I want to thank Ms. Fane so much for grounding this discussion from a real decision maker experience. Next slide, please. So as part of the reflection, even as we are going to the conversation on taking up the questions, is BSDD is an institutional bridge where we move from diagnosis, translation, allocation, and then there's demography, functional classification, and then budget negotiation. So I want us to take a step back and integrate what we've heard today from the two speakers and also across the series so far, where we began with diagnosis. We already established that demographic transition generates predictable pressure, age structure shifts, dependency patterns are evolving, and care demands across childhood, working age, and older age. And the DDMI, which is the Demographic Dividend Monitoring Index, helps us to identify where structural weakness limit readiness. Time use data and care analysis reveal where invisible burdens accumulate. And diagnosis alone does not change allocation. So DDMI alone will not change allocation. And what we have examined today is the missing middle layer of translation. If demographic evidence remains in reports and care remains defined conceptually, fiscal systems continue to operate according to administrative logic and annual ceilings. And translation means embedding this demographic and care logic into the language and the structure of budgeting. This is why we describe BSDD as an institutional bridge that connects long-term demographic dynamics with annual fiscal processes. It connects functional classification with sectoral submissions, and it connects structural evidence with negotiation spaces. And the sequence matters. Diagnosis to generate evidence, translation then to translation formats that evidence, and then allocation reflects the formatted priorities. And in practical terms, demography informs functional classification. Functional classification also shapes how expenditures are presented, and presentation of this expenditure shapes even how budgets are negotiated. And negotiation also determines how budgets are allocated across the various sectors. And BSDD strengthens the information architecture with trade-offs within which the trade-offs occur. It also helps us to eliminate the fiscal constraints, and it improves the quality and structure of decision-making under those constraints. So what we see today is one, there's demographic signal, and then structured translation. From that, we move to fiscal visibility, and then in the allocation debate. This is the systemic logic that we have been building around even in our series from when we started. So I want us to open the conversation to questions from what we are gathering, from what has been shared. Next slide, please. And we would encourage you to share even more from the institutional realities and also what you're experiencing within your different countries. I have a few questions for Prof. Dramani and other questions for Mariama, and we'll start with Prof. Some are comments, some are proposals. People want to also connect. One person is saying, Prof, thank you for sharing interesting graphs and intriguing. What software do you use for analysis? Maybe, Prof, you can comment on that. And then the other comment was on, it's a comment framed also as a question. It is not clear why Kenya has not been able to implement findings of the time use survey in budgeting. Prof, I will go through the questions and then you can also be able to answer them just in one go. And then one question that is asked is also, is it mandatory for demographic dividend sensitive budgeting to have representation in each government ministry to ensure monitoring of the achievement of the demographic dividend with a focus on well-being, subjective, in brackets, subjective well-being? And the other person also wants to connect via email, which you can be able to provide that. Another question for you, Prof, which is the last one that we're picking, is I am Lesfran, World Bank based in Conakry. This is actually an interesting tool. Policymakers need to oversee the current dynamics in terms of public budget allocation and take actions toward advancing to harnessing DD. What is presented is highly scientific, maybe somehow difficult to understand. What is the plan to make it easier for us to be able to, or policymakers to be able to capture that?
Okay.
Prof, if you're able to answer
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rina. I will start with the last question, and thank you, Lefrant, for your question. Yes, sorry, Craig. At Craig, we develop new tools in terms of policy, then policy action on this work. You see that it take 8 to 12 months to finalize the process because it's a process which need to be updated every 3 or 4 years because the structure of the decision in terms of allocation is very robust in terms of it's not change the day by day because the sectoral allocation and sectoral well-being creation is not something which change every day or every year. It's changed every 3 or 4 years in terms of when we have new evidence in terms of new surveys and also it will take 3 years to see how the budget allocation is the same or not, all this. Then in terms of communication and advocacy, we develop now with our donors and the others research centers new tools in terms of advocacy and policy tool. For example, we have now what we call the BSDD policy scorecard, which is very simple which can help policymakers and technicians, decision makers to see what is the situation of the country. That's what I can say in terms of what we plan to make it easier. But you also want to I want to say to all the specialists in terms of developing and planning is not easy because it's how we allocate. It's a work of a work of a Ministry of Plan. This is not just something which is easy. It's very important to have it also in mind that we have more than 200 or 300, depending on the country, people or 500 people who work at country level to do this work. And I will give after the floor to one of the policy maker, Mrs. Fani, who is there, who can give the experience of the Gambia and the other people I see on the who connected. Okay, the question about the Kenya. Kenya is in the process to implement time use survey finding into budgeting because we have now household satellite accounts. That's the first step. Then we are working. We work with Kenya, University of Nairobi of Kenya, our colleague, Prof. Moses, Prof. Mwabu, Prof. Robin, to calibrate the first step, which is we are in the process. The first step is the life deficits to understand, to better know what is the social demand in terms of paid work and what is the care deficit. Now we are at this process with a new evidence, with a new survey of 2021 time use survey, which is a big resource for us to do this work. That's what I can say for the Kenya for the question of how Kenya implement it in the budget. Because you see, before going to the budget, you need to know what what is the evidence? What is the diagnosis? Okay, for the question about the software, we use a lot of software because we take raw data with countries. Then we use data to calibrate, for example, national account, NTA, national transfer account, national time transfer account, social account matrix. Then we use Stata for that. We use AViews for all econometrics to calculate elasticities and so and so. And also, with the help of our donors, and we develop our tools, software like DDMI application, gender DDI application, and BSDD application, which we use to help countries because you see that is in terms of data is we use big data, all the information in the system, and it's not easy to work or with all a large size of data. This but with the support of our donors and with program which exists in collaboration with World Bank, with UNHPA and the others institution, ECA. Then we try to do this work, helping countries. I think that is, if I don't forget a question, and as we have now, we are lucky that Mrs. Fanny is there. I think that she's on the field working, implementing this work. And I see also the question about the contacts. I think that yes, I can send my contacts. There is no problem for that. And I think for the other question, it's remain the countryside, the field size. Then because Mrs. Fanny is on the fields, we will support at Center of Excellence. We support countries, but I think that policymakers and as Mrs. Fanny, I can give her the floor to respond, and if I forget something, she can add it. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. That was great. Mariama Fane, as you also comment on what Prof has thrown to you, you can also, there are 3 questions for you. One is from your experience, what was the most difficult institutional resistance you faced when shifting from a traditional administrative budget to a functional BSDD framework? That's question number 1 that's coming up. And the other question is, if you had to advise another country that wants to adopt BSDD, what is the first step, institutional step that must be secured to make the reform credible and sustainable? And the last question for you is, you mentioned that structure matters more than rhetoric. In your view, what concrete signals show that a Ministry of Finance has truly internalized demographic sensitive budgeting? Please, if you could answer the 3, because of time, we'll just pick the 3 and then we can continue these conversations later.
Thank you very much, Rina. I'll be very brief with my answers. Like I said during the presentation, when it comes to the DD sensitive budgeting, it's work in progress. But what we have done also as a country is that we have what we call the National Observatory for the Demographic Dividend to ensure that everyone is on board. I think that is one of the questions that somebody asked, whether all ministries are going to be involved. For us, we have all the ministries as part of the National Observatory for the Demographic Dividend. And together we worked on updating the profile for the country, as well as developing the demographic monitoring index. So they're all aware of what is happening. They're all aware that we are not reaping the demographic dividend. They're all aware of some of the concerns that we are facing as a country because of the budget structure. Not only that, when we went for the DD sensitive budgeting training in Senegal, we went with the Ministry of Finance. In fact, we asked them to take the leadership. We went with the Directorate of Budget, And we went with very senior people, the number 2 and number 3. The director could not come, but we went with key senior people at the Ministry of Finance, because we know that if finance we don't have the buy-in of finance, it's not going to work. But apart from that, we're also ensuring that we're bringing on board policymakers as well as National Assembly members. Because when it comes to budget allocation, it does not only stop at finance, but it also goes to the National Assembly, and they have the final say when it comes to how much is going to be allocated and how much is not going to be allocated. I hope that answers the question. Can you hear me, Rina?
Yes, thank you so much
Okay, thank you.
for the great feedback and answer. I want us to conclude, but this does not mean that the conversation stops here. It means we have just set a pace for continuation in conversation, and also people are free to also provide feedback to us. But even as we conclude, next slide, please. We're closing the session today by consolidating the core message that is in this discussion that we've had today, which is situated in the broader arc of the series that we've been having. The demographic transition sends early and measurable signals. I think we have seen that even in the presentation, not just today, but also in the series that has gone on. We've talked about age structures and how they evolve. And they don't just evolve, they also evolve in a predictable way. So the data is already there and it shows how age structures are evolve. There's also information on dependency ratios and how they shift. And also the care demand increases across the life cycle. And these pressures are not unexpected events, they are structural transformation. So care demand is therefore not episodic, it is systemic. When budgeting systems are not structured to absorb demographic signals, the cost does not disappear. It is absorbed by household. It is absorbed disproportionately by women. While you're talking about it being absorbed in the household, it also goes more into being absorbed by women, and the data is already showing us. And it is also absorbed through time poverty, constraints in labor participation, and weakened human capital formation. So what we have examined today is the institutional response to this reality from the case that we have had on how the Gambia is working around the PFM reforms. And BSDD strengthens fiscal decision architecture. It does not remove the constraint. It does not expand the fiscal space automatically. So this is not a solution that would see the fiscal space increasing automatically, but it ensures that demographic realities enters the space where trade-offs are negotiated. In the next session, which will be our final webinar, we will complete the evidence chain. We will move from demographic signals to translation through BSDD to macroeconomic structure by linking BSDD and social accounting matrix and structural economic evidence. And we will anchor care not only in budgeting processes, but in the core architecture of the national production and consumption. The objective of our conversation will be demography informs structure, structure informs allocation, and allocation shapes development outcomes. And in that final session that we'll be having next week, we'll bring the full system we have been building across the entire 6-part series. So I want to thank our participants so much for joining. And for those who have been consistent from webinar 1, we do really appreciate your time. We will, for those who are concerned about the slides, we'll be able to share. We are aware that we shared slides for webinar 1, webinar 2, and webinar 3. We'll be able to share the slides for webinar 4 and this webinar, which is 5, once they are ready. And then we will share the last slides also once we conclude next week. Thank you so much for always being here, for the feedback, for the conversation. Let's keep it going. Let's connect also. And Prof has already shared the email on the chat, which you can be able to use that to continue these conversations. Thank you.